In this section, we're going to talk about replacing the static sidebar content in our current theme with dynamic blocks output by Drupal. In order to do that, we need to add some new regions to our site. Right now we've got the region for content here, and that's printed out. We also need to add some regions that will allow us to print out our blocks into a left sidebar and a right sidebar like so. Before we do that, let's take a look at how regions work. In order to do that, we'll go to the structure page and then the block administration screen. On the block administration page here, you'll see that I have the ability to take any defined block and to place it into one of these regions on the page. The regions are provided by the theme. The theme that's currently enabled is the 960 robots theme. However, if you remember in our .info file, we haven't declared any regions yet. That means Drupal has gone ahead and assumed that we would like it to use the default set of regions. If I switch back and look at this once more, you can see that default set of regions is the left sidebar, right sidebar, content, header, footer, highlighted, and help. In most cases, you'll probably want to declare your own set of regions for your theme. So let's take a look at how you might do that. If I take a look at our design mockup again for the 960 robots theme, I'll just open this HTML file. I can start to get an idea of what regions I might want to make available in my theme. If I look at this, I can see up at the top here I've got the main menu and the search. So I might want a header region that I can place those into. I've also got a content region here, and I need to make sure and create a content region because Drupal 7 requires that. So I've got that here. I've also got two possible sidebars, so we might call this a left sidebar and a right sidebar. Even though they're not the traditional left of the content, right of the content, I think that that'll still make sense. I can scroll down further, and I can see there's some additional things down at the bottom of the page. There's sort of this large footer, the elsewhere on the web, and then these two pieces of content, recent images and about us. When looking at this, I'm thinking, these are probably going to be blocks as well, so I need a place that I can place those blocks on the page. So I might have two regions down here, like a footer left and a footer right. In addition to that, there's also this all your base are belong to us and additional navigation at the very bottom of the page, so I might want a region to put things down at the very bottom of the page as well. So that gives me an idea of the regions that I might want to create for the 960 robots theme, and here's how we would do that. Back in our .info file, we need to add lines for each of the regions that we would like to create. I'm going to go ahead and just create one named content to start out with. So I'll say regions inside of square brackets, the word content, all lowercase. This is again the machine readable name of this region is equal to content, or the human readable name of this region. The machine readable name here is important because this is going to be used as the key of a PHP array, so it needs to be something that's a valid array key in PHP. You don't want to start this with any kind of special punctuation characters or numbers, and just stick to lowercase alphanumeric characters and underscores. The human readable name over here, however, you can name it whatever you want. This is just used as a label and provided to the site's administrator. For now, I'm just going to add this content region and save. If I switch back over to our actual site, and what I'll need to do before I can see that region show up is clear the cache, because it needs to reread our .info file. We made changes to it. So I click clear the cache. You see these messages up here at the top. It says the block search form was assigned to the invalid region sidebar first and has been disabled. What happened was our theme had a set of regions that were provided by default by Drupal. Sidebar first, help, sidebar second, and so on. And those regions had blocks in them. When we cleared the cache here and told Drupal that we're now declaring the regions inside of our theme, we've only got a region named content, and Drupal didn't know what to do with all the blocks that were placed into these regions like sidebar first and help before, so it just went ahead and disabled them. If I switch back to the structure page and then blocks, you'll note that on this page we now only have one region. whereas before we had a number of them were provided by Drupal by default. In this case, we've only got the one that was provided by our theme, the content region. So I'm going to go ahead and add a number of additional regions to this page, and I do so by editing my .info file. Based on our examination of the design mockup, we knew that we wanted to add a number of different regions. So our .info file might look something more like this. I'm also going to add a comment here up at the top, just to keep my .info file clean. Any line in a .info file that starts with a semicolon is considered a comment, and is just helpful information to keep your code clean. So I've added a header region, content, sidebar first and second, a page top and page bottom, footer left, footer right, and help. Page top and page bottom are similar to content in that they're regions that are somewhat special in Drupal 7. These regions are automatically printed out by the html.tpl.php file. And if you don't include them in your .info file, you can still enable the theme, but there are some cases where Drupal, and specifically third-party contributed modules, might get a little bit confused because they're going to be trying to place content into one of these two regions, and they might not exist. An example of that is something like the Google Analytics module, which adds a bunch of JavaScript into the footer of your page in order for it to perform the tracking on the page. It's trying to put that JavaScript into this page bottom region. If that region doesn't exist, Drupal's okay with that. It won't prevent you from enabling the theme, but it will cause problems when you go and try to install the Google Analytics module. It tries to place this JavaScript in this region, which doesn't exist. It can't do that, and then all of a sudden you've broken that module. So in addition to creating a content region, which is required, I highly recommend that you also create a page top and page bottom region for all of your themes. I'm going to save my changes there, and if I switch back over to our site, and clear the cache once again by going to the performance page. I told you we'd do this a lot. Clear all caches. And then back to the block administration page under structure and blocks. You can see I now have a bunch of regions showing on the page, and I can take some of these blocks and place them into additional regions. And I'm going to do that right now, just so that we can make sure that there's blocks in there for when we start doing some theming. I'll just pick a couple blocks at random and assign them to the sidebar first and sidebar second regions. We'll just place 2 in each one. I can scroll up to confirm that and then save it. After adding blocks to our regions, the next thing that we need to do is actually make sure that these regions are printed out inside of our page template file. If we switch back to our template file, right now, we can see that those regions that we just added are in order to replace things like this sidebar left and the content in there. We want to replace with the blocks that we placed in the left sidebar. Same thing with this sidebar right. We want to replace those with the things that we placed in the right sidebar. In order to do that, we need to start deleting pieces of the static content and replacing it with dynamic variables. So I'll start by just deleting all of this inside of the left sidebar div, like so. And then I need to print out the appropriate variable here to show our blocks that are in this sidebar region. This might be a good time to look at the contents of this page array and see what's inside of it. One of the easiest ways to do that is to use a function that's actually provided by the devel module. We enabled the devel module in an earlier step when we generated a bunch of content, and it provides a function named crumo that will allow us to print out this page array in a nice friendly format so that we can easily see what's inside of it. So what I'm going to do is actually go up to the very top of my page template file. I'm going to open a PHP block, and I'm going to use the function DSM and print out the page variable. DSM is actually also provided by the devel module and is a wrapper for the crumo function. What this will do is take the contents of the page array and print it out in a nice pretty format, sort of like PHP's printr but with some additional formatting, and it'll do so in the messages area on our page. From here, I can go back to our site, and I just need to refresh one of the pages to see it print out the contents of that page array. So I'm going to hit refresh. I actually have to refresh twice in this case. The reason for that is that the contents being provided by that DSM function are being put into the messages variable in our page template file. the first time that we view the page, it's already too late to have put that content into the messages variable. So what I'm seeing right now is actually the DSM from the previous page load printed out in the messages variable. Either way, that works just fine. It allows us to inspect the page array. We can begin to inspect the contents of the page array by clicking and drilling down further into the different keys of this array. I can see here there's a key of content, sidebar first, sidebar second, page top, and so on. These correspond to each of the regions that we've created that have content in them. I know that these have content in them because this content key has additional elements inside of it. It says it's got 4 of them. If I click on that, I can continue to drill down. I say, inside of the content region is this system main block. Inside of that system main block is the actual content of that block itself. This is a renderable array inside of Drupal. A couple of things to point out about renderable arrays. Any key of an array, like system main here, that starts without a pound symbol in front of it is considered an element. An element is an actual piece of content or something that can be rendered to the page. Anything that starts with a pound symbol, like block here or weight, is considered to be a property. And properties are used by the render function when determining how to take a piece of content and turn it into HTML. In this case, the important thing to note is that we've got a sidebar first and sidebar second region now, and that those regions contain our blocks that we placed in them. Sidebar second, for example, has the recent content in the new users block that we placed in there. Great. I can go back to my page template file now and start to print those things out. Inside of our page.tpl.php, I'm going to go ahead and remove that debug statement that I added earlier because I don't need it anymore. And I'll scroll down to where I previously deleted the static left sidebar content and now replace it with the dynamic Drupal region and the blocks. Page, sidebar, first. Another thing that I might want to do is actually make sure that this sidebar first variable contains some content before I print out this div to the page. The CSS for our theme is actually smart enough to say, if this div doesn't even exist, don't try to provide space for it on the page, and it will accommodate the fact that we only have one sidebar. In order to do that, though, I need to make sure that I'm not printing out markup that I'm not using. I can do that by saying if page sidebar first, which will evaluate to true as long as the sidebar first key here contains some content, and will evaluate to false if it is empty. And then add the corresponding end if below. I'm just going to copy and paste this line and do the same thing for our right sidebar down below. I'll delete the static hard-coded content, replace it with our dynamic region. This is sidebar second. And I'll also do the same with the if statement here. Sidebar second. And our closing if. Great. Now when I switch back over to my site, I expect to be able to refresh the page and see Drupal's blocks printed out in those sidebars instead of the previously hard-coded content that we see here. Refresh the page. And there you go. You can see our navigation block, who's online, and the recent content blocks are being printed out in the appropriate place on the page now that we're printing those regions. I also have a couple of additional regions I need to print out on the page. The two down here at the bottom, where we're going to place the blocks for the left footer and the right footer. Another way for me to know what the names of these regions are, if I didn't print out this page variable and take a look at those, is to look at my .info file. Inside of my .info file, when I created the regions, I gave them machine-readable names here, like sidebar first, sidebar second, or down here, footer left and footer right. So I know I have a key in that page array named footer left and one named footer right. I can use that information back in my page template file to start replacing the footer regions at the bottom with their dynamic counterparts. I can do the same here. The left footer, and we can also replace down here the right footer. These regions don't actually have anything in them currently, but if they did, that would start to get printed out on our theme now in the appropriate spot. Here, make sure I change that to right. After I save this, I expect to be able to go back to our site and refresh and have the hard-coded content be removed. However, we don't currently have any blocks in those two footer regions, so this is just going to be blank at the moment. But you can see there's nothing there right now. If we had placed blocks there, however, they would show up in our footer left and footer right regions. So that's the process for adding new regions and printing them out on the page. You need to do two things. First, you need to add your regions to your .info file, give them a machine-readable name and a human-readable name that is displayed to administrators, and then you need to print those regions out inside of your page template file using the render function, saying render $page, and then the key of the array is the same as the machine-readable name for the region that you declared in your .info file.